Sunday night edition of the Crash the Pond podcast. We are back just weeks away, hopefully, from a Anaheim Ducks training camp. And for tonight's show, we've got the full crew on deck. We've got CJ, of course, Jake, and myself. So this should be a fun one. We're gonna go over a few topics, and hopefully it'll kind of make sense at the end of the day.
Happy 4th night of Hanukkah, everyone. Just want to throw that out there, you know? It's 4th night of Hanukkah. Hope everyone's had latkes by now. I made some for this. Guys, I need to just get this off my chest. This is the first time I've ever actually made latkes myself. And they turned out pretty good. Except for, half of them that turned out really burnt.
So I just want to point out that I wished Jake a happy Hanukkah in Hebrew.
Oh, wow. You're throwing this here.
I'm just airing.
You're airing grievances.
I am. This is where we wash our dirty laundry on the pod for all the listeners. And Jake just kind of stiff-armed me. Didn't really react. Not even a anything. And now he's touting this happy 4th day of Hanukkah. So shame on you. Shame on you. Me trying to extend an olive branch and just getting stiff-armed.
I'll remember that. Now I got to look up something in French. I think on Christmas I'll need to look up
how to say acknowledge it.
I think I have to hold both of you apart to stop fighting.
I mean, I would acknowledge it and just give you a polite thank you, if nothing else.
CJ, if you want to do that on the Twitch stream, you are currently between us and above. So just reach out your arms to the side and grab us. All right, there we go. There's the video element for tonight, guys. As you can tell, this episode's going to be all over the place. If you saw the tweet about tonight's episode, I think we said this is going to be a mushy episode.
Yeah, that's really selling it for the people who are debating whether or not to keep listening.
I mean, some people enjoy this type of humor and this type of entertainment that we provide them, Felix, as I sip my green tea, getting energy.
This is true. So here's the thing. We have a bunch of topics. I have been traveling today. I have been in transit. And so I don't have everything necessarily in front of me. I'm not as expertly prepared as I usually am, which I'm sure Jake can attest to, that I'm usually expertly prepared. So I'm going to kick it over to Jake. Jake, you're going to throw the topics at us today. You're going to do the thing.
But before we do that, we've gotten some people in the Twitch chat kind of really helping out the show. Fat Geralt has subscribed with Twitch Prime. Oh, wow. We have Heyo Dflow resubscribed for 3 months in a row. And we've got Scientific Lance resubscribed. And Lewis X209 resubscribed. We've got Kempafu just resubscribed at 18 months. We've got a hype train going, guys. So we just had a really good amount of people. So thank you, everyone. Some of you for a very long time. Like I said, Lewis was 27 months. Kempafu, good friend Tony, 18 months. So thank you to everyone. So, Science Cat just resubbed also for 3 months. I believe that's Jess from our beer league team. So how's it going, Jess? Thank you, everyone. That's a really great way to start this episode. And now we're gonna get into
excellent way.
Now we're gonna get into some fun. So where do we want to start with this? We got a couple topics to hit.
Let's just start here because I feel like we should just get this out of the way. So there was an article today at The Athletic where I think they're doing a series where they're dissecting each rebuilding team. Is that correct?
I think they're doing every team.
Yeah, I think it's a full-blown.
Because I saw there was one on the Bruins. There's one on the Devils recently. There's one on the Wild. There's basically the Flames. Every single team in the NHL, and basically the premise of this, just so everyone knows, is James Myrtle is going to be looking at the cap situation for every single team. Dom Luszczyszyn's diving into the analytics for each team in these articles. Scott Wheeler and Corey Pronman will provide some prospects up. Eric Duhacek will propose a game plan for those general managers, and at the very end, the local beat writers are providing their thoughts. So basically, Eric Stevens at the end will rounds up basically everything that was said in this article from those other people that are more national type of writers trying to loop it into the local view.
Well, so just to clarify, so this series is basically how the athletic staff would run the Ducks. So it's a future, it's kind of an extension of the NHL Future Power Rankings series. And so big shout out to The Athletic, by the way, because a lot of our content is just us reacting to the articles, but that's what we got to do in this stretch before we get games back, which should be soon from everything that we're hearing.
It's going to be nice to talk about a game again.
So the other day, actually yesterday was the first night back of the NBA preseason, or the second night back of the NBA preseason, and I actually watched preseason basketball because I had not seen my team, the Golden State Warriors, play in, however many months, 9 months since the pandemic began. So it was really nice. I was unreasonably excited to watch preseason meaningless basketball, and that is also how I'm going to feel, but to a much higher degree once we get hockey back.
Picture what it's going to feel like to actually talk about a Ducks game again.
Something new,
Sounds
not
fake.
rehashing. It sounds impossible, but it's happening. Very excited. Also, I did want to give a special shout out to Jake. Jake's just in my crosshairs today.
What did I do?
a special shout out. So actually, Jake tweeted the other day that he got an email from NHL TV saying that his subscription was renewed, and he took that, and it was renewing, I think, for January, something like that.
Yeah.
And you took that as, hey, this could, hold on, let me finish. So this could mean that the season is starting soon, that this is happening. And I at first was kind of skeptical because I thought, well, mine renewed a couple months ago, so how much can we really read into that? But then later that day, I actually got the same email for January. So Jake vindicated. Rare W.
Wow. I thought this was going to be, you said me in your crosshairs after earlier. I thought this was just going to be you pulling the trigger on me.
I'm like the Last Jedi. I'm subverting expectations.
So with that being said, let's talk about that real quick. So basically, yeah, like Felix said, the NHL sent an email. NHL TV is going to renew on January 10th. To me, that's a sign the league's going to start. The league's starting. It's coming.
Yeah, it's happening. It's happening. It's happening. Duck if. Okay. Well, let's jump into this article. So Jake, why don't you kind of walk CJ and I through it here?
So basically, I mean, to start, they go through the cap situation for the Ducks, which, as we all know, this season, not good. A lot of money on the books. A lot of money on the books for old players that the only one that really is going to contribute is Ryan Getzlaf. Corey Perry has $6 million on the cap, and he's not even on the team. Ryan Kessler's on IR, and they do make note that he's not currently on LTR. That is one thing that they can do eventually, like we've talked about kind of ad nauseum at this point in time. But David Backes also on the cap sheet for another couple of years. So as they put it in here, the combined weight of Corey Perry's buyout, Ryan Kessler on IR, and David Backes is $18 million, or more than 22% of their cap space. So 22% of their cap space is taken up by two guys not on the Ducks or not playing for the Ducks, and a guy that is a fourth line center. That's not great. That's not great for a cap crunch. And now, as we've said, there is the benefit for the Ducks of next summer. It's going to clear up some space. They're going to have a lot more flexibility next summer, which is a good thing. But if you're looking at right now what they can do to win now, this season there's a lot of bad money on this roster, and that's a tough situation. And so who knows what they do with Ryan Getzlaf next summer also is a big play in this. But basically, as of right now, it's a tough situation. And that's what we've kind of said here, and that's reflected in the article.
So, CJ, what's your reaction to that? I have some thoughts, but why don't you jump in here?
Yeah, I think that the big concern here is that the Ducks aren't going to be nearly as effective at doing what Bob Murray wanted to do last season, which was what he called weaponizing the cap space. And yeah, they're going to be able to do some of that by putting Ryan Kessler on long-term IR. But again, remember, Corey Perry's buyout cap hit is jumping to $6 million this year. Again, we do have David Backes, and while I think that personally David Backes will be a fairly useful forward, he's not this star guy. He's not going to be a guy that's going to push you to the playoffs by any stretch of the imagination. So if the Ducks are in a situation come the deadline where they want to try and weaponize cap space, they're really, really it's going to be really difficult for them to do that because I think most of us have basically agreed that we're going to be pretty shocked if they make the playoffs this year. And that's another reason why having a high cap hit in a situation like the Ducks, where they're more than likely not going to be very successful, you want to be able to use that cap space to get those assets to accelerate the rebuild. They kind of did that a little bit last season, which was good, but now they have even less space to do that moving forward into this season. So it's very much a big concern for them moving forward, even if they're not necessarily going to be contenders.
So my only issue with this line of thinking, especially with how Myrtle framed it, that they should be looking to unload anyone over 30 and just kind of in general looking to move off of these contracts that are longer out. I agree that the Ducks should probably be thinking that way, but if you dip your toes into those waters, I feel like you have to jump all the way in. And if you jump all the way in, you're essentially tearing down the grand majority of this roster. And sure, you will have a lot more flexibility when next offseason rolls around and the off seasons after that. But you don't really have any kind of framework to then plug in some big free agent additions into. So if you dispatch, for example, your older blue liners, so if not one or more of, Fowler, Lindholm, Manson, what are you really then rebuilding into? There's this whole kind of debate about rebuilds and how if you go totally scorched earth, it's harder to then climb all the way back because you've really taken it down to the bone. And so maybe keeping some of these guys on board may be beneficial for the longer term. So, for example, I wouldn't move off of a Hampus Lindholm, even though, yes, he's probably going to decline. He's still good. He's still giving you value for that contract.
Do you think that is someone that Myrtle is specifically talking about in this portion of it?
So he specifically said anyone over 30.
Yes.
So I don't think he's actually addressing that, but the thrust of his argument is that they should be looking to move off of those types of deals. And so, yeah, like for a Henrique, for a Silverberg, I think that that's fair because you're getting value for those guys now, but that value, like a Lindholm, is probably going to decline to some degree, but it's going to decline and you're stuck with the term. So I think that probably those are the guys you want to target. And with a Cam Fowler, if you want to try to move him, it's going to be really hard to do that. He's got so much term left on his deal. He's got 5 seasons left after this coming season, and he's got a modified no trade clause.
I think it's 4 or 5 teams that he'll accept a trade to.
Yeah, it's only 4.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a 4-team trade list, and you're still getting value for that contract. It's not. I don't even know if it's commensurate to the cap hit. He was a good defenseman last year by most metrics, but is he worth a 6.5? I don't know. So I guess personally, just to kind of close my thought here, I wouldn't go full scorched earth. I think I would try to pick and choose a little bit who I'm moving out because this team, if you do it right, can be competitive sooner rather than later. You can kind of thread that needle.
One thing I do wonder specifically going into the upcoming seasons with these contracts for guys over 30 is, do the Ducks look to move guys that maybe they weren't so dead set on moving because there's chatter that there's going to be a flat cap for 7 or 8 years. That's when I've been listening to various different podcasts with different people that understand kind of more of the nuance with how the money flow is going to be coming in and how that is going to skew so heavy towards the players that they're going to have to pay it back over time, is that one of the downsides to kind of the CBA not getting renegotiated is that the cap is probably going to remain flat for longer than it would have in the first place. And it could be at $81.5 million for the entirety of this CBA for all 7 years. And so I think one of the things that you hope when you sign a guy to a 6-7 year deal is that at the end of the contract, that cap hit is no longer taking up as much space as it was when you first signed the guy, because the cap has historically, ever since it came into play, always risen year over year. And by the end of a deal, the cap hit that you had for that guy is no longer near the top of it. I mean, you look at a guy like Ryan Getzlaf and his cap hit. When he signed that deal, that was one of the top cap hits in the league. Whereas now, that's what, 4 or 5 million, 4 million or so less than the top cap hits. Maybe a little bit, maybe 3 million. But still, that's kind of the point.
It's gotten lower.
And now that that's no longer going to be the case, I wonder if that plays a part, and maybe the Ducks do look at moving a guy like Cam Fowler. Maybe that plays a part, and maybe a guy that's going to be a UFA, you're more likely to move because you don't think you're going to be able to afford him because of the flat cap situation. A guy like Josh Manson, guy like maybe even Hampus Lindholm, who's going to be coming up on his contract pretty soon. A guy like Rickard Rakell, also going to be coming up. So there's a lot of tough decisions coming up for these guys in the 25 to 30 range. And these are guys that we've talked about ad nauseum on this podcast. And part of that is this situation. It's just kind of been accelerated now with the flat cap situation coming up with these guys potentially needing new contracts, and whether you want to burn bad money in them for that will stay at its level of cap or percentage of cap for possibly the entirety of the contract. And that's something that they're really going to need to factor in a way that they may not have to past, because I think
to tie in.
Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I think just to kind of to tie into both of your points here, where specifically for Felix, I completely agree with Felix. Like, there is a way for the Ducks to get back into contention without completely setting fire to the entire team. There absolutely is. And James Myrtle in his section, he goes a little bit more scorched earth than I think we're thinking that they do. But I would agree that there is a way. There are certain contracts on here who could get the Ducks some decent assets, who would free up some money and would allow them to be a little bit more flexible. And yeah, that goes against Bob Murray's plan to so-and-so be competitive. But the problem that we have right now is that at the current moment, Bob Murray doesn't seem to have picked a specific path to get them back into realistic contention. Him saying that they're going to get back into contention right now is, look, that's just not realistic, and the chances of that happening are slim to none, right? But there is a way, as Jake said, to move out some of these contracts, and we can hope that maybe, look, plans change very quickly in this league. And there are these guys like Cam Fowler, like Hampus Lindholm, who you can make these decisions on and actually have a path forward. And so far, I think what we've seen over the past couple of seasons is that plan, especially with upper management, with the Samuelis and with Bob Murray, really tends to not take shape until closer to the trade deadline. We rarely see these type of franchise direction type of moves in the offseason, right? Historically, where a lot of these moves come is at the trade deadline. So it's going to be really interesting to see how they perform moving forward and head towards that trade deadline, just because there doesn't seem to be a realistic plan in place. But again, things could very much change depending on how big of a step that the kids take this season, which I think is going to be one of the most important things to deciding the direction of this team.
Yeah, and just to put a bow on this before we move on to the next component of this article, I just want to note that the Ducks are going to have some big decisions in the summer of 2022 if they don't make those decisions ahead of time. That summer, Lindholm, Manson, and Raquel all come off the books. And so what do you do? What do you do for all three of those guys? Because I think for all three, they present their own challenges, but the thread between all three is that they're going to be entering their late peak, if not beginning the decline at that point. And how much are you willing to buy into the rest of those years that they're going to have to offer where they're still somewhat useful? So yeah, this is a jigsaw puzzle here, and there's not a clear-cut solution.
We should make it clear that all of those three guys are going to be UFA also. If anyone was even thinking that they might still be RFAs, they're not. They're going to be unrestricted free agents at that point in time.
I would say this just as a quick hot take. It's actually not a hot take at all. The only guy I think I would re-sign of those three at that point would be Lindholm. And
that's a freezing cold take.
Well, I think a lot of people would bring back Raquel.
That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah, and I think even you would bring back Raquel.
Yeah, I would. You're right.
And especially with Drysdale coming up, this team definitely needs some wingers. Like, we're, dearth and centers going on right now. So if you're going to prioritize one area over the others, and we've talked about this before, I think all three of us tend to agree that offense is the slightly more pressing need at this point.
And with Manson, it's really hard to say what he's going to be able to get because he doesn't really put up points. He has 1 year he put up some points, but he hasn't since, and I don't see a path where he's really going to do that again. He doesn't get the kind of power play time to do that. So maybe if you could potentially bring him back at a cheaper price, but
someone's going to pay him stupid money.
Future podcast, we'll be able to discuss that. Jake, what's the next topic?
Keep in mind really quick. I wanted to keep one last very quick point. Remember, next summer is the expansion draft. This isn't a 2-3 season thing away anymore. This is coming right on our doorstep.
And go back and listen to our episode a couple weeks back if you want deep dive into the expansion draft.
That was excruciating.
Yeah, Felix loved that. So the next thing is analytics. So Dom Luszczyszyn really dove into analytics. He's kind of the go-to guy at the Athletic. He actually came up with his own GSVA model, which basically uses game score. He created kind of that concept in the NHL and creates kind of basically what type of value some guy adds to a roster. And basically, so for him, a Stanley Cup checklist is basically he came up with some research, different things like that, and basically laid out that you need some kind of elite players on your roster. You want to have like an elite one center, elite first line winger, elite defenseman, different things like that, and kind of projecting out for the next 3 seasons what players you have in those positions. So not shocking, no elite winger, no elite defenseman for the Ducks, and also no, there is no elite 1C Derek Grant on this list either, guys. So the only player that is elite on the Ducks and will be for the next 3 years is John Gibson. That is it. And do you take any issue with that?
Not really. I think that, so can we get into the rest of it? Or I guess just to answer your question, just bare minimum, no, I don't think that that's wrong. Because I think Gibson's the only guy who's really elite at his position.
Yeah. And so kind of as we move through the list, there's also other categories. So he goes through whether you have a top line center, not just elite, but also top line winger, number 1 defenseman instead of just elite first line defenseman. So, and then he also has top 6 forwards, top pairing defenseman. So running through this, number 1 defenseman, the only player that is considered that for the Ducks or top line, anything, is Kevin Shattenkirk, which caught me off guard a bit, but I think if you look at the stat that he's utilizing, which is game score value adjusted, I believe is what GSVA stands for. Kevin Shattenkirk put up a lot of points last year on a very good Tampa Bay team. And game score really does factor in points significantly into it. So it's not that shocking to me that Kevin Shattenkirk is probably the only one that would kind of fall into this mold. I don't know if I would necessarily say that he's the number 1 defenseman on this Ducks team. I don't know if you guys disagree with that necessarily or agree with that.
Can I just come out and say it?
Go for it.
CJ, do you have a take for us?
Let me put it this way. I think he's got a shot to be the number 1 defenseman, but I wouldn't necessarily give him the award yet.
Here's my question. Who did Hampus Lindholm piss off, or who did he wrong to be taken out of this consideration?
So I actually want to like address that really quick. Dom's model, by his own admission, weights the last 3 seasons, and it weights the recent season, the previous season, higher than normal. So there is, he admits, some recency bias in there. And the Hampus Lindholm did not have a particularly good season last year. He didn't have a bad season by any stretch of the imagination, but he didn't have his normal kind of elite shutdown defensive seasons that we've seen in the past. So he dropped off a bit. I would kind of think that's a little bit flawed for me personally, but that's why.
I think a flaw with game scores, and this has been my big issue with game score on the whole, I think it's a cool stat to go game by game to look at impact on a game. But overall, if you're trying to analyze a player through game score, I feel like it falls a little bit short because it factors in points and goals and things like that too much as compared to looking at on ice factors instead. And so I think that's where this is falling short and why Kevin Shattenkirk is probably considered a number 1 defenseman per game score, because he put up points in Tampa Bay. He put up shots. He put up things that game score does value, whereas Hampus Lindholm doesn't necessarily do those. And so that's why if you look at Lindholm, so running through real quick the rest of the list, there's top 6 forwards. The top 6 forwards for the Ducks in year 1 and year 2 are Adam Henrique and Rickard Rakell. And then in year 3, it's Adam Henrique and Jakob Silfverberg because of Rickard Rakell being unsigned for that 3rd season. And they are all considered average on this list. Top pairing defenseman, Cam Fowler is considered a top pair defenseman by GSVA for all 3 seasons, with the final 2 being a low end. And Hampus Lindholm, a low end top 4 defenseman.
That's insane.
I don't know if I necessarily agree with that.
Yeah, and so
that's crazy talk.
I think GSVA is good to evaluate forwards. I think it lacks the ability to evaluate defensemen, though.
Yeah, and like, of course, all due respect to Dom and to people making these models, because there's a lot of work that goes into it, and this isn't. I think that people like Dom are totally willing to be open about the potential drawbacks or limitations of what they're putting together. And I feel like with something like this, I would just argue, and I haven't done maybe the necessary research to be a 100% on a claim like this, but I do think it does underrate someone like a Hampus Lindholm, who doesn't really stand out from a production perspective, but stands out more from an on-ice perspective, where he's the type of defenseman who's going to drive shot rates for and against, and he's going to make you better in that sense. He's not really going to have a ton of individual offense. He's not a huge power play contributor. But if we look, for example, at goals above replacement, Hampus Lindholm was still good last season, if not very good, both individually, on ice, special teams. He was used in brutal matchups. So I still think that from just my own view of what makes a great defenseman, the type of defenseman that I would lean on night in and night out, Hampus Lindholm is still that guy for me. Now, it's not to take anything away from Cam Fowler, but I think that there's enough evidence when you look at other models to say that Hampus Lindholm belongs in that tier as well. And I think that it makes sense. And sorry, just to quickly finish, I would just say that Fowler, I understand why he's in that tier for this model, because it does rate individual contributions more, point production, and Fowler does have that on Lindholm, no question.
So this is a fun little thing here. I pulled up on Evolving Hockey the goals above replacement leaderboard for last season among Ducks defensemen. You'll want to take okay, let's put it this way. I think we can all guess who was the number one Ducks defenseman based on GAR. Who do you think?
Fowler.
Yep. So that one's easy. Where do you think Lindholm ranks?
4th.
You have this up, don't you?
No, I actually don't. I swear.
He's 4th.
No, I swear I don't.
He was 4th with 1.2 goals above replacement. So, nothing otherworldly, but still pretty solid, pretty responsible. Guess who the two above him were?
Michael Del Zotto.
He's second with 2.4.
And Eric Goodbranson?
Ooh, no, I don't think you're going to get this.
Juice?
Yep.
Oh,
Juice?
Sample size.
No, hold on.
It's actually not.
No, it's not.
It's
a cumulative stat.
Oh.
Jake just exposed.
Christian Juice put up 1.6 goals above replacement, good for 3rd on the team for the entire season in 9 games. Like, again, I wouldn't expect him to keep up that pace, but Christian Juice had a really good 9-game run for the Ducks after he was traded.
Yeah, I'm wait and see on Christian Juice, but I am cautiously, and I mean cautiously optimistic.
But, circling back to this, basically the purpose of this, though, I think, even though we can kind of get into the weeds on our arguments about what he's classifying as number 1 defenseman, top pair defenseman, top 4 defenseman, I think what this list highlights, the Ducks' only position that's elite is goaltender. I could argue that they don't have a number 1 defenseman on this roster, or a top line winger or top line center, and I think that's fairly accurate. I think maybe you could argue that Hampus Lindholm or Cam Fowler are number 1 defenseman, but it would be lower end or fringe for them to be considered a number 1 defenseman.
Can I just add another thing on? I'm just like standing up for Lindholm now.
Go for it.
So Lindholm, all of his play driving numbers were still good. Now, if you look at goals for per 60, when you look at the RAPM charts, he was definitely below average, but and I know it isolates for individual performance, but the Ducks just weren't a good team, and they didn't have many good scorers. And I think that when he was on the ice, there just wasn't a lot of offense and finishing going on. And I do think that takes away from his overall numbers. And so I still think he's a very good top pairing, play driving defenseman. He might not be elite. Maybe I'm a little wrong about that, but
I think he's number 1 still? A number 1 D-man in the league?
I think he's solidly a top pairing defenseman.
But
so
I agree. I'm putting you on the spot. Number 1 D-man.
I don't think he's a number 1 defenseman, because I think to be a number 1 defenseman, you have to do more than what he does, because that threshold should be really high. But I think that for Lindholm, if you look at the totality, not just the totality of his career, but even just the last 3 years, he's still way up there in terms of play driving, and I don't know. I'm just still high on him.
So I think circling back, I think we all hopefully CJ, let me know if you disagree with this. The Ducks don't have a number one defenseman. Then they don't have a top line winner.
I agree with you.
They don't have a top line center, which also means they're not elite. They have they have a couple they have some top 6 forwards, and they have some top pairing top 4 D-man. But this highlights the issue with the roster that there's nobody at that upper end that is going to have the game-breaking talent on the back end or for the forward position. And I think that the only position that is covered is goaltending. And the issue with goaltending is John Gibson can save goals. He's not going to go out there and score them for you, though. And so that's the issue for this team, is scoring goals. And it was last year. It will still be this year. And that's kind of what this is putting into focus.
And Jake, I think you highlight, I think all these arguments have basically highlighted the Ducks' possible path back to the playoffs. Yeah. Really, it's going to come down to goaltending. Like, there's several different things, obviously, and we've talked about them ad nauseum, right? Like, the kids are going to have to take a step forward. The current established people are going to have to perform at their career highs or better. But the number one thing that is going to happen in order for the Ducks to even sniff the playoffs is a John Gibson elite season, like a truly elite season. He's going to have to steal multiple games. Without John Gibson having an elite season, even if the kids take a step forward, even if you have these, veterans performing very well like they have in the past, that's still probably not going to get you to the playoffs. You have to have John Gibson pull out an amazing season.
Yeah.
So I slightly disagree with that, but I don't know how much time we want to spend here.
Well,
want to move on.
The real quick thing that I was going to add to what CJ said is the other thing on top of John Gibson is I think the one thing, if we're trying to be optimistic and go against what it's saying here, is that while no, the Ducks aren't elite in any position outside of goaltending, I think their defensive core, top to bottom, is good to great, and I think that is something that's going to be a very good thing for this team for this season. And so I think the bigger issue this year is the forward group. I think the defense, there's a good enough group there that even though they're not elite, I think every pairing has someone that's going to be good enough for them and will help out significantly. And I think that we're not having a Corbinian Holzer, Jacob Larson pairing rolling out there every game is also going to help out this team a lot. So I think if we want to focus on path to playoffs, I think it's going to be both goaltending and the defensive core.
So the thing I just wanted to say with Gibson is I think that the thing that has to happen is he just has to be average to above average. He doesn't have to be necessarily elite, but I think he has to at least be better than his expected, just slightly better than expected. I think what needs to happen is this team needs to just not be terrible defensively, because if they're terrible defensively, you're asking too much of John Gibson already. It's just, you can't do that for a 4th year in a row. So anyway.
Yeah. Okay.
Upward and onward.
Next part is prospect pipeline. So this is this is gonna be interesting because
how much time do you have? How much time do we have?
How many podcasts have we done on this? So
more than I can count.
Basically, this is Scott Wheeler dives in and basically, I think, does a pretty good job of summarizing the Ducks prospect system. Basically saying it's a nice blend of players who are both knocking on the door and who are still 2 or 3 years away. The real issue that the Ducks had was they didn't have that top end talent. It was a lot of B-level talent. And the good thing for the Ducks is that as guys are going to graduate, like a Max Comtois or Josh Mahura, you're also going to have guys that will come in and fill in those spots. And so there's not going to be a rush for them to make it to the NHL, a guy like a Henry Thrun or Sam Colangelo. They're going to be able to take their time and really kind of develop as much as they need to be these kind of more B-level types of prospects. The thing for the Ducks is that they've started to add a little bit of star power, and that's really been helpful for them. And we've talked about this at length, but they've added Trevor Zegras, obviously. They've added Jamie Drysdale. And one of the things that I think a lot of people are taking issue with, I guess, maybe with Scott Wheeler's determination is that he says that with Drysdale, they might have a right-handed number 2 defenseman for the top pairing. And I think some people will say, well, they took him so high. Why is he not? He should be number 1, all these different things. This is Scott Wheeler's determination. And I think we saw this from a lot of different people that even though Drysdale was a really good player, it's not necessarily that he's going to be a top pairing defenseman. right? I think that we all read those same types of reports, right?
Yeah, I think that the top pairing defenseman is his ceiling, not necessarily what is projected of him. I keep in mind when you're projecting prospects, by and large, almost all prospect evaluators are going to be conservative in their estimates, and for good reason, I feel. But again, Jamie Drysdale isn't necessarily like he wasn't as hyped or had the type of results that like Rasmus Dahlin had when he was selected first overall, right? Dahlin has shown that look, he's probably going to be an elite defenseman. He might already be an elite defenseman. Drysdale, while very, very good, again projects as a number 2, and I definitely agree with that. However, keep in mind that there is a chance and that it is within the realm of possibility for him to exceed that projection and become a number 1 defenseman. I think it's too early to make that determination.
This is someone who's watched the game, watched guys develop, and based upon his determination through scouting of what he expects a player is going to be. That doesn't necessarily mean it's locked in that that's what he's going to be. That's what he's seeing. And
So what do we define as a number 1 defenseman? Because we just kind of talked about this, but just to just start this off, I would say a number 1 defenseman has to give you really solid to elite play driving and has to contribute offensively. And I think Jamie Drysdale can do all of those things. Can being the operative word, though, doesn't mean that that's the likeliest outcome. But I think he could be a number 1 defenseman. It's just it's going to take a lot for him to get all the way there.
Yep, I agree with that. So kind of going through the rest of kind of what Scott Wheeler's saying, kind of basically at the end of it all, he thinks that the Ducks prospect system is solid to very good, mainly due to the fact that this team is a little bit in a reset mode, but they don't have the talent right now to pull themselves out of this reset, that they need to add more to it. And that's the key thing here, and that if kind of circling back to what the premise of this article is, which is how would you rebuild, how would you run the team for the next 3 years? Scott Wheeler's advice, which take it or leave it, is he says don't get ahead of yourself. Keep adding prospects and picks to the system. And I think that that's a very, very good idea. And we've talked about it on this podcast a bunch, that this system is good. They could have a better system, though, for where they're at. They probably should have a better system, to be honest.
Well, the issue is that the Ducks can't get complacent because they had a good 2020 draft. This 2020, I think 2019, the 2019 crop and the 2020 crop are the beginning, to me, of what will be the next wave of kind of difference makers. I think that, with all due respect to guys like Comtois, Terry, Steele, Jones, the guys that we've really dissected over and over the last few years, but those just don't project as star players, at least not right now. Maybe one or more of them do become stars, but in the last 2 years, we have seen potential stars be brought into the system, which is not something that we have seen. I mean, I count the number of years since before that. And so the problem is none of the stars that they've drafted in the last 2 years are stars that you can really build your schedule around. So, for example, look at the New Jersey Devils, who are right now in the thick of a rebuild. They can at least tell themselves, let's kind of project our rebuild, our schedule, quote unquote, around Jack Hughes, around Nico Hischier, potentially around Alexander Holtz. The Ducks aren't really, even though Zegras and Drysdale, and I would add Jacob Perreault into that mix, all project as quality NHL players, they're not the kind of guys, I think, quite yet that you can just say, this is the guy that we're going to build everything around. And I do think that it's hard to be a rebuilding team if you don't have one of those guys. And then the other issue is that to get one of those guys, you have to be a bad team, which the Ducks don't want to be, don't intend to be. And so that's kind of the predicament that we're all finding ourselves in here talking about this.
Yep. And
sorry to be maybe doom and gloom, but that's the reality of this prospect system.
Yeah. Here's the thing that I feel like I want to hammer home this point, because some people understand this, some people don't. Realistically, the salary cap and the draft system that we have, and not just in the NHL, but really in most North American sports, has kind of forced this strategy to be the most effective strategy. Like bottoming out, you don't necessarily have to bottom out and get multiple number one picks, but you kind of have to be bad for a few years to restock your cabinet and to go out and to become an effective team again. I think that the only team really over the past since the salary cap was instituted who didn't do that at one point was Boston. And I think they're the exception, not the rule. So you have to work within the system. You can't just take these guys and wait for them to develop and not, bottom out, but then still try to like restock with high end prospects. The system is not built to work that way. And so you can make an argument, and that's a whole another conversation to talk about different drafting scenarios and getting rid of the salary cap, which I'm a fan of. That's a whole nother conversation. But the system that they have right now, realistically, what we're talking about being bad in order to restock your talent and selling off good assets, that's just fact of life of how teams get good nowadays.
Yes, and I do think that for the Ducks system, it's a good system, and there's a lot of guys who could become good NHL players, and it would be a great system. It would be worth even more if the Ducks had this kind of ready-made roster to plug those guys into. But the roster that they currently have is more on the tail end of its competitive window, and so and that makes it tougher to just plug in a guy like Terry or a Zegras and hope that they're going to provide you that spark, because they're still going to need some development. They're not just plug in and play guys. I mean, Troy Terry, it took him a while to even get to where we saw him last season, to where he was, I would say, a good kind of depth player. So it's tough, but I think if you're a fan of prospects, if you're a fan of the Ducks, there's definitely plenty of reason to be optimistic about the prospects. It's just more how they fit into the bigger picture that there may be some room for skepticism, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one thing I want to make note of that I found interesting from what Scott Wheeler said is Jacob Perreault, potentially a guy that is could become an impact player, which is more so than he basically says about anyone outside of Drysdale and Zegras. So that kind of shows you how people feel about Jacob Perreault and what the Ducks got with their late first-round pick.
Well, Perreault could be a star, so...
Yeah, exactly. So...
He was a steal at 27.
Do you want to go into the final portion from the National Writers, going from Eric Duhacek?
Sure. Let's do it.
Okay.
As in I read it?
Yes. I'm giving you this one.
Okay. Well, I haven't actually read this article the way through.
Fine. Fair enough.
Why don't you do it?
I'll just keep going then. So basically, Eric Duhacek was kind of looking at this from a global perspective, what the Ducks should be doing, where they're going to be going. And so basically, he brings up a good point that the Ducks do understand the value of draft picks and do a pretty good job of letting guys kind of build up their confidence, nurture them, play in the AHL if they need it, get them in the NHL if that's needed. And basically that if Trevor Zegras makes a leapfrog, this could basically be a jumpstart for this Ducks franchise. But at the end of the day, the Ducks, basically it feels like they're about to embark on another, as he puts it, spinning your wheels in place kind of season. And brings up the point, this could be costly for Dallas Aikens, which, I mean, we actually just got a Twitch question in the Twitch chat from Ginger Wolf saying, basically, why does Aikens get so much flack for having a bad season last year if there are all these issues with the rosters that have gone over? And so that kind of is echoed by Eric Duhacek basically saying that this could prove costly for Dallas Aikens due to the fact of having all these young pros, having the roster that he has. And basically, Eric Duhacek ends basically saying a lot of things have to go right for the Ducks to basically make the playoffs here. And it's not likely that happens.
Why are we stopping at Dallas Aikens? I don't think he should be the fall guy in all of this.
No, and that's the point is that Ginger Wolf brings up why is Aikens getting the flack right now when it seems like it's a roster issue, and it seems like Duhacek's even bringing that up, saying it could prove costly for Aikens, and it's not necessarily his fault.
I just think that even if you're not, the Samuelis are clearly very smart people. They're very successful. And even though they might not be experts on the sport itself, anyone with any degree of analytical ability would look at the situation and say, yeah, this isn't on Dallas Aikens. If the Ducks aren't any good next season, yeah, that doesn't speak well to Dallas Aikens. If he can't get more out of this group than we might expect, then yeah, you can't just write that off. But at the same time, who's the one that's setting him up for this? Who's the one that's giving him the hand to work with? Who's the one who's had the opportunity now to have 3 coaches? Who's the one who's kind of dug the team into this hole? It's not Dallas Aikens, unless maybe I'm missing something here. Agreed. So I think if the Ducks are really bad this season, which is a possibility, it's not necessarily the likeliest outcome, but if they are really bad, it has to be the last season that Bob Murray is the general manager of this team. And yeah, even if that means that there's going to be some flux in the summer with the expansion draft and having to deal with all of that, it doesn't matter. You have to turn the page at some point, getting a fresh approach in there, getting a new set of eyes without the loyalty to past players who made this team as good as it was previously. I think that that's really important. And look, if the Ducks have this big improvement next season, or even a moderate improvement, and there's all these underlying metrics that show that their overall play has gotten better, that the prospects play well, that some of the veterans have bounced back seasons, then I don't think you can justify firing Murray at this point. There's still, all those things are still possible. So I'm not saying that this is what has to happen, but if if the bets that he's making don't pan out, and he's making there's so many layers of bets on this season, right? Gibson has to play well. The veterans have to play well. The kids have to play well. If all those things just fall flat, then I think at that point you have to take the controller away from Bob Murray. And does anyone here disagree with that or want to comment on that?
Nope.
I think the thing that, to summarize it, is if the Ducks are bad again this year or worse, yeah, Aikens probably deserves some of that blame, but I think he's a couple of bullet points down the list of who should be taking the lion's share of the blame. And I think most of us are tending to agree that at this point, this is Bob Murray's team. This is his decisions. We're starting to see the fruit of decisions he made 2, 3, 4 years ago, right? Sometimes even longer than that. This is where the rubber meets the road for Bob Murray. And while Dallas Aikens could share in some of that blame if the season pans out the way I think scary to hide behind if it goes that way.
A little bit of robot CJ, but we're all good. We got you back.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add on Murray is that this isn't us or me just bashing Bob Murray. This is just the reality of the NHL with general managers. When you've had multiple coaches, when you've had multiple disappointments, multiple playoff failures, multiple missed playoff seasons, that at some point that those checks are going to come due. And that is where Bob Murray is trending. Now, again, there's totally a possibility that things could go much better next season, but we have to see. This season is going to be fascinating because it's a total unknown for me. Well, anything could happen, and it wouldn't really shock me.
So, kind of the final piece of this article is the reality check, which is Eric Stevens look at this roster.
Yes.
And this is and what he made of kind of everything above. And basically, he even said, he's like, I want to be able to be an optimist and one that would vary from the doom and gloom above, but it's pretty much exactly kind of what they said. He basically is like, they're not a good team. And he brings up the point, though, that Gibson could come back and have an absolutely stellar year. The Ducks could come out of the gates, and he mentioned that with this being a shortened season, the way that you start is so important with how you, with playoff situation. And he said back in 2013, the Ducks took advantage of that by coming out of the gates hot and winning the Pacific Division. I think the difference between this year and then is the Ducks had a prime Getzlaf and Perry then. The Ducks had a prime Getzlaf and Perry then, I believe. Actually, no, I was going to say I think they had Luby Versnovsky, but I don't believe they did anymore at that point in time. But still, they had prime Getzlaf and Perry. They had solid goaltending. So it was a little bit of a different situation at that point in time. And this is the big point, and this is something we should spend a little bit of time on here. It was reported this week by Pierre LeBrun that it's potentially not going to be what we thought it was going to be for the division. we originally thought that it was going to be the Ducks, the Sharks, the Kings, the Coyotes, the Golden Knights, Dallas, Colorado, and then the 8th team would be Minnesota. And so Minnesota is a bit of a wild card there, and potentially with how they were going to end up. But Pierre LeBrun reported this week that it may not be Minnesota, that it may be St. Louis. If it's St. Louis, it's a pretty clearly defined top 4 in the division of St. Louis, Dallas, Vegas, Colorado. And it's not likely anyone from outside of that ends up making the playoffs if it is those 4 teams, if the Blues are in the division over the Wild. And that's kind of where I'm looking at this from. Now, granted, it's a short season. You come out hot. You can basically go against kind of the numbers. You can outperform what your expected results are with a hot goalie, with different things like that. But with that being the division, it would be really, really tough to make it.
It would be, but I think it would be tough either way.
Yeah, Minnesota is still a good team. I think we should hit on that. They're a team that is adding in some really good talent. They're a team such as Marco Rossi. There you go.
Thank you.
There you go. And they had some really good numbers at the end of last year, and Kaprizov, and so it's not as if they would be a cakewalk either. So it would be really tough for the Ducks to be able to make it. And if they did, this will be a divisional playoffs. So if the Ducks snuck in, they would get Colorado or Vegas in the first round. And so one of the things that is brought up, and one of the things that I've thought about with this, or we've talked about or whatever, is that this is a season where most likely you're not going to be able to have fans in the stadium at all.
Mm-hmm.
The downside to any sort of tank is that you could lose revenue because people aren't in the stands.
Oh, I've heard this.
If you can't have people in the stands, why are you committing to winning? This is the year out of all years to commit to not making the playoffs, that you can do that. And I mean, even Eric Stevens does bring up that this is, or not brings up, but brings up that typically you don't want to lose in Southern California because it puts you into irrelevance. And so the Ducks have wanted to avoid that mainly for that reason. But I would argue that with no fans in the stadium, this is basically kind of the perfect moment. And he brings up basically kind of the end of it all is basically, with this being a 56-game season, 10 games in, you should start making your decisions on where you are. And if you are that far out, 10 games in, you should start looking at what you should do, what are guys you should sell, maybe different things like that, and try to get yourself into the big picture. If maybe you're in the mix, maybe you keep pushing, maybe you keep doing that because there's a chance. I'd still argue it's not worth it this season. This is the season to bite the bullet. And Operation Asses, aren't there rules against obvious tanking? So you can't obviously say you're coming out and tanking, but you can move guys for picks. You can or put together a weaker roster. There are ways to do it. I mean, look at what Buffalo did years ago.
So when we say this is a season to tank, we don't mean the team should actively try to lose. The on ice, that the players, the coaches, it's management moving out some guys who make you better now for assets that are going to make you in the future. It's not as much about the guys that are playing. We're not saying they're going to throw games. That's not what we mean.
Remember, management tanks, not players.
Yeah.
But I did just want to say though that the tough thing is that if the Ducks are 3-7 after 10 games or 2-8 or whatever, what do you think is the likeliest thing that Bob Murray does? You could name one thing, multiple things.
I have no idea.
That's the thing, is what is it going to take to convince this guy that it's time to pull the plug? What is it going to take?
Do you think the Samuelis pull the plug?
Well, that's the thing. If I was sitting in the chair of the Samuelis, their combined love seat or whatever, and I see that the team is off to a horrible start, that's it. Like that's it. You can't trust Bob Murray at that point to do what is the right thing in that situation, because he hasn't done it in the past with previous opportunities, right? And I understand that there's been the injury excuse in the past, but enough is enough at that point. So yeah, that's what they should do. Do I think that's what they'll do?
I
wouldn't bet on it.
Yeah.
I think something that's very important to remember is that I've seen some people And yeah, the Ducks aren't necessarily, they're not the Toronto Maple Leafs. They're not even the Kings, who are owned by AEG, right? But here's the thing, and I think a lot of people don't really know about this. Henry Samueli's net worth has increased by 50% over the last 3 years. 3 years ago, he was estimated to be worth about, I think it was like 3.7 billion or something like that. His net worth now is estimated to be at 5.8 billion, which, and I need to do some research on this, I believe that would actually make him one of the richest individual owners in the NHL. So individual person, not necessarily
but
company.
Small market team.
But small market team. That's the thing, is that the Ducks can survive a
They're
year
in the hole anyway.
2 years of tanking, of decreased fan engagement. Like, yeah, you do. And Eric Stevens brought up this point in that article.
Just release jerseys.
Exactly. You're in the LA market, right? So realistically, like, you'll be irrelevant against the Lakers, the Dodgers, even the Angels, are have more of a fan base and more eyes on them than the Ducks do. You are fighting with that. But that being said, again, he is rich as hell. Like, come on, he's gotten richer in the past. It's up to him to be able to do this. They can withstand this. Money is not a legitimate excuse here to not tank.
Yeah, and like the Ducks right now, did you guys see the Forbes list?
They're what, 20th, right?
They're 23rd.
No,
okay.
They're 23rd, and their net operating income is like negative 9.1 million or something like that. So they're not really making money as is, just on the franchise alone and the revenue. So you might as well just eat that. And of course, who am I to say how someone should spend their own money? I get that this is easier for me to say than someone who, even though they have billions of dollars, they probably don't want to lose money. They didn't make all their money by losing it. But we have some understanding of how this specific ecosystem works, and some short-term pain, if executed properly, can lead to long-term gain.
What's the pain?
Overwhelming gain.
What's the pain this season?
And the thing is that there's already, and the thing just to close out is there's already pain. They're already struggling as it is.
But realistically, what's the difference this season? Typically, if you don't want to tank because it can affect fan base, or it can affect attendance, affect various different things like that, which ticket revenue is a very big thing for the Ducks. That's not happening this year.
How funny would it be if, once the divisions get announced and let's say St. Louis is confirmed, the Ducks just trade Manson and trade Raquel? Like, yeah, we're out on this division. Like, this isn't going to work for us.
Yeah.
Rebuild time.
Yep, exactly.
That
would be good.
Keep in mind, Jake, there is still TV ratings, right? The Ducks haven't.
There's still revenue streams.
True.
With Fox Sports there's still revenue streams. And also, like, let's be realistic here. If they suck, the merch goes down. Now, maybe this whole reverse retro thing came out at a really good time to keep their merch sales up, even if they aren't necessarily going to be great, and that they were going to take a hit. So maybe that's also part of the thing to release some of the retro stuff. So there's definitely things there. However, I would agree with you at the same time that because gate revenue is such a big deal and such a huge chunk of change for these NHL clubs, if you are going to tank and have it the biggest effect on that be attendance, then you're right. This year is probably that year to do it.
It is. It's the only year where gate revenue is not. I mean, hopefully, knock on wood, it's the only year where gate revenue is not going to be in consideration. So yeah, I think that, to kind of wrap this all up, I think we're all team tank. I still have some degree of optimism that this thing can turn around without having to go full scorched earth. I would even argue that maybe you shouldn't go all the way down, but generally my thought is that you should be thinking long term at this point, because what are the Ducks really chasing right now? Like, what are all these moves mapping to? Get in and hope that you can get to the third round, right? I mean, to me, my overarching philosophy is that you should be thinking, okay, we need to A, have a chance to get in, and B, once we are in, go all the way through. And if you look at this Ducks team, it's hard to imagine them, even if they get in and they're playing well, being a team that goes all the way to the Stanley Cup final and can even win it, people might point to Dallas and say, oh, look at the Dallas Stars. No one saw them going all the way to the Cup final. But the Dallas Stars have stars who are in their prime or in their late prime, and they have younger stars on the blue line. So they're not at all in this on the same wavelength as the Ducks in that regard. And they're not just a get in and hope good things happen type team.
And one thing I want to mention, because Apparition brings it up, and I think it's a good thing to point, is that basically for people who would say, well, losing doesn't necessarily guarantee you a first overall pick. You look at Detroit last year and them getting fourth overall. But the thing that you do is, if you handle it correctly, you're not just putting yourself in a position to get that
that's the only thing you're hoping for, right? You want to have
look at Ottawa, for instance. Ottawa basically, and now granted, that is an extreme situation where it worked out perfectly for them, but they ended up with 2 picks in the top 5 of the draft. They ended up with a really great system for them, and that they're going to be able to build off of for a while because they were able to sell. And so that's kind of what you're looking for by rebuilding. You're not necessarily doing it just for that high-end pick. You're also selling off guys to get prospects, to get things like that. You look at the Kings. This past season is gonna be huge for them, not just because they got Quentin Byfield out of it. That's not the only reason why. They also were able to get Tyler Madden out of Vancouver for Tyler Toffoli, and it's moves like that where you're able to get guys into your system on top of your picks already. And that is exactly the thing. And that's really the benefit here of what you're trying to do, is you're not just setting yourself up to have a good pick in that draft. You're setting yourself up to have additional draft capital, additional prospects. And that's how you build a system like the Kings, who were mentioned many times in this article as having a really good system. And it's very true. Their system is good because they've moved guys like Jake Muzzin. They've moved guys like Alex Martinez. They've moved guys like Tyler Toffoli. They've moved these guys out for picks and for prospects and have built their system up in a very, very good way.
And they've gotten a little lucky as well, getting the second overall pick.
No doubt.
You know, that's the
thing though.
Yeah, you put yourself at you give yourself a chance to be lucky when you're back.
If they wouldn't have won
and that's the thing is that.
Sorry, go ahead, CJ.
So I was gonna say, like, that's the thing, is that if you are bad, if you are tanking, whatever you want to call it, yes, you're not necessarily guaranteed that first overall pick, but just like everything really in professional sports, almost every aspect of it is literally nothing but a weighted lottery. You don't have complete 100% control over where you're going to end up, but you can do things that will either increase your chances or decrease your chances. So if you tank, if you sell off players, then you have a much greater chance at landing that first overall pick than you do otherwise. And so what? Even if you're Detroit and you get knocked down to fourth was the very bare last
Raymond
that they could have dropped to.
Lucas Raymond's looking legit also.
Yes, Lucas Raymond is killing it right now. And look, if Detroit didn't do that and they won some games and they tried to win out and something like that, and they had, say, the 4th best overall odds, then what if they get passed up by 3 teams? Now they're picking, 7th, 8th, something like that, and the difference between the 7th pick and the 8th pick might very well be a superstar or not. Like, you don't know. All
Jack
you can
Quinn
do
and Marco Rossi.
Exactly. All you can do is just try and make it better for yourself. Give yourself the chance. In my view, and I've said this before, there are 2 different things. There are playoff contender, 2 very different things. I think that the last, in 2018, when the Ducks were swept by the Sharks, the Ducks weren't a real cup contender. They were playoff contenders. They could make the playoffs, but they weren't going to go very far. Then there's cup contenders, and I would argue the cup contenders so far right now would be like Vegas, Colorado, these just truly top of the table teams who are legit in contention. And yeah, anything could happen. They can get knocked out in the first round, a la Tampa to Columbus a couple years ago, but they have built themselves up to have a shot at the cup, not just a shot at the playoffs. And that, to me, right now is the difference between the Ducks rebuild and the Kings rebuild. The Ducks rebuild, they're rebuilding to make it back to the playoffs. The Kings are rebuilding to get a cup.
Yeah, and the thing is, if the issue with with rebuilding is that you're not guaranteed a first overall pick, well, signing free agents and trying to make the playoffs, you're still not guaranteeing yourself anything there either. You're not guaranteeing yourself the playoffs. You're not guaranteeing yourself a cup. So the objection shouldn't be that it's not a guarantee, because there's no guarantees, like you said, in anything. So let's retire that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Agreed. All right. So moving on, real quick. Let's go to this now. Let's do this piece of it. So Ken Knight, good friend of the pod, sends me an email every once in a while asking some questions. So figured, let me go ahead. Let me read it from him. This was sent to us after Thanksgiving. So basically he said, "Hey Jake, hope you guys have a fabulous Thanksgiving. My belly is full. I'm sure you guys saw the announcement in June about the OC Vibe development coming to the Honda Center grounds in 2024. What does this have to do with the Ducks? Everything. Remember the year Staples Center was delivered and what happened with Lakers? Not an accident that they prepared to deliver a championship caliber team when the Staples Center's complex was delivered, first in the Lakers three-peat. There have been a few things in the press about the that the Samuelis want the Ducks to be in contention when OC Vibe opens. If I was putting a large part of my capital into development at Honda Center, I would want that too when it was delivered. I fully believe that it is Bob Murray's directive and the Samuelis are willing to spend between now and then to make that happen. 4-year deadline. 3 seasons between now and then. Shattenkirk and Grant contracts fall into that prep window and give the Ducks flexibility by that deadline. I would postulate with the cap space opening up in 21-22 and beyond that to a degree, look for the Ducks to take a swing on a few first-line forwards at this year's trade deadline and beyond. Come on, Mitch Marner. Remember the days of Pronger and Niedermeyer trades and signings? There might be some excitement to come in COVID flat cap era in Anaheim. Just to connect the dots theory that follows the money. Would love to hear your thoughts, Kin. So, what are your guys' thoughts on this?
Well, yeah, clearly the Samuelis are like CJ was saying, they're making more money. They're pumping the money back into it to get more out of their investment, and it would be nice to have a team that's going to bring people out, increase that gate revenue. And so that's probably one of the motivators for the Ducks to remain competitive, is that there's more at stake now because of the developments. Now, I would still argue that shouldn't override everything else that we know about rebuilds, but it makes sense. It's understandable why they want to remain competitive.
Yeah, it definitely does.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I think that so keep in mind, we really need to talk about timing here, because OC Vibe, again, is scheduled to end in 2020. That's still a good, that's going to be, 3-4 seasons from now. So you don't necessarily this season want to take a swing on guys at the trade deadline, because let's be realistic, the guys who are going to be available at this trade deadline are mostly going to be either rentals for the season, or maybe they'll have a year after. You really need to time it right. If we are going to see any of these moves to coincide a good Ducks team with the opening of OC Vibe, I would expect it to be post-expansion draft at the earliest, especially once we kind of figure out, hey, this is what the team's going to look like. Here's who they're taking. We have a little bit more certainty in the future. And also, I mean, there's a lot of hockey to be played in that time. We have no idea what's going on. And I think the point that Jake Felix and I have been making here is that this team can rebuild, and they can rebuild fairly quickly if they make the right decisions. This doesn't have to be a 4, 5, 6, 7 year drawn out rebuild. There's no reason it has to be. There is a path here to have this rebuild over within 2 to 3 seasons, and I think they make the point of that in the Athletic article. But we're going to need to start seeing some of those moves and some sort of direction from the franchise in order to make that happen. I completely agree with the question that, look, they want to be competitive come that time, but realistically, it's going to be all about the timing. And I think with the expansion draft coming up, and given where the roster currently is, I'm not sure now is the right time to start making those moves towards necessarily being better right now. You're going to want to wait a couple more years and pull this rebuild off right.
Yeah, I think so. I think that you're pretty dead on that. I don't know if you necessarily want to do it this deadline to go and trade for a big piece. I think you should be looking to move out guys for futures this deadline, no doubt. But I think maybe this upcoming summer, maybe you look at taking a shot at Taylor Hall as a UFA again, right? Maybe the Ducks look at that. I don't know if I would do that. I see Felix's face, and now I feel like he's just going to judge me for saying that. But maybe the Ducks take a swing on a guy. Maybe they go after like a Mitch Marner, like he said, with the Leafs having a cap situation. Maybe they look at trying to get him for prospects or picks or cap relief. Maybe that's what the Leafs are looking for. I mean, we talked about it with it being a flat cap. It's going to be really tough for the Leafs moving forward. They were probably banking on the fact that the cap was going to go up when they signed all these guys to deals to make it work. Maybe you can get Nylander out of there. So I think that it's a pretty valid point that it's the Samuelis are going to want to be done with this. I mean, they want to be done with this rebuild now. Let's be real. But they're for sure going to be want to be done with this rebuild by the time OC Vibe opens. And they're not only going to want to be done with the rebuild, they're going to want to be back in their contending window. And I think that is a very valid point from Ken, and something that I think is a very, very astute observation with connecting the dots there. And I think that maybe that will factor in. Now, whether or not that is something that Bob Murray has the ability to do, or whether he's not the GM anymore, maybe someone else is here taking care of that. But I think it is something to keep an eye out for. Of, hey, OC Vibes coming up. The Ducks are probably going to want to have a very competitive roster by that point in time.
Yeah, I mean, it would be nice. It would be nice to go to fun, competitive hockey games in a really cool environment. When the world is back to normal again. That sounds really amazing right now. So I'm rooting for that to happen for sure.
Yeah. Yep. So I don't know, Felix, what are your thoughts overall on all this?
Oh, I already stated.
Yep, but I just wanted you to put a bow on all of it, you know. But okay.
Well,
right,
I'll put it.
Fine. You know, trying to tee you up to finish a topic off, and you just throw it right back at me. Now I know how it feels from our text message earlier today.
Please.
Oh wow.
Don't even go
Call
there.
Call back.
Children,
Call back.
fight. Don't fight.
Call back.
Okay. Well, the goal of a franchise is to try and make money, to try and bring in fans, to try and have a good product. That's what the Samuels are trying to do, and they're reinvesting into it, which is awesome, because as someone who lives in the area, I want to be able to go to a bar after the game and not have to have a steep Uber bill to do it. So yeah. You want to have a good product for that. I get it.
All right. So, final topic for this show is World Junior rosters were announced. So we want to briefly kind of mention it. Felix just loves how much we talk about prospects at this point on this show. As you can tell.
He's dying right now. You can see it in his eyes.
So we went into depth last episode, but just for everyone out there to know kind of where the rosters are at. Canada announced Jamie Drysdale is going to be did make the team. He is pretty much set to be on the first pairing with Bowen Byram for the entirety of the tournament, and will look to build upon his good World Juniors last season. And the other Ducks the other Ducks players will be Team USA. Actually, all Ducks prospects on Team USA made the cut. So you have both Trevor Zegras and Sam Colangelo making the cut, and then you have Henry Thrun and Jackson Lacombe making the cut. Lacombe and Colangelo may have made it. We won't really know, as a result of some players on Team USA testing positive for COVID and thus not being able to make the roster. And John Van Beesbroek actually had come out and said that basically they wanted to have a different roster construction for the tournament, but due to COVID, they weren't able to have the players that they wanted. So take that as you will, but Colangelo and Lacombe both made the roster, and so it'll be fun to watch Team USA for the Ducks. The only other Ducks prospect will be on Team Sweden, which will be Albin Sunsvik, made the roster, and so there will be 6 Ducks prospects in all at the World Juniors, and that all starts and gets going on December 25th. And so there's going to be a lot of hockey to talk about, a lot of hockey to watch, and it's going to be a lot of fun. And so really excited for this tournament. Felix is just so excited for this tournament.
I am actually. It's gonna be a good one, especially for Ducks fans and watching Team USA, which I would imagine the Venn diagram of that is pretty large. American Ducks fans. It's gonna be fun. You're gonna see Trevor Zegras in a big role. You're gonna see some prospects that maybe you haven't had as much of a chance to see in Thrun, Colangelo, and Lacombe. Am I missing someone? I've been called out all weekend for missing people. So just making sure I'm
Thrun, Colangelo, Lacombe, and Zegras are on Team USA. You are correct.
yeah, I just don't want to be chastised again. So anyway, yeah. So
Leave Felix alone.
if you're an American Ducks fan, which I figure is, I don't know, 80% of our
Hey,
listeners at a minimum,
we
then
have Aussie checking into our Twitch chat, who is from
oh
our
yeah,
good friend from Germany, resubbed for 2 months. By the way, also wanted to give a shout out to Quack City, our good friend Chad, resubbed for 12 months. So thanks a bunch. But yeah, so there you go, German Ducks fan tuning into our Twitch chat live or Twitch stream live.
is Germany in the World Junior this year?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so
they
you might be
barely held on.
You might be rooting for Germany, I would imagine, but if you have a second team, it would have, and you're a Ducks fan, it would have to be Team USA because of just the amount of Ducks prospects on there. And I'm excited to see it. I to be honest, the last couple of years, maybe even the last 3 years, I've barely watched the World Juniors. I don't know why. It's just one of those things that I watched religiously growing up, and as time has gone on, I've become less just a diehard when it comes to that. But now that we've spent so much time on this show, especially with the last draft, getting into prospects, I think now I'm more excited to see it because I actually know who these guys are beforehand. And I think specifically for Team USA, they could win the whole thing, which pains me to say as a Team Canada supporter, but they have a good team. They're doing things well in Team USA.
As Apparition puts it in the Twitch chat, I will watch any hockey at this point in time.
Well, that's what I was going to say. That's what I was going to say is that I'm just starved for hockey and competitive hockey. With all due respect to, the Czech League and the SHL, it's just too much work to have to watch those leagues. And so, the time difference and all that, I would love to watch them, and the KHL, but this is going to be, it's in our time zone, I believe. It's in Edmonton,
yeah,
right?
That's
there will be a little bit.
It's like an hour off.
There will be a slight preview on the website or article going on the website listing out the games and the start times and everything like that this week. And so so a lot of the games, I think what?
Credit to Jake.
Yeah. The earliest I believe is there's an 11 a.m. start for some of the games, but majority are in the 3 to 6 range. 3 to 6 p.m. range.
So we're going to get some good competitive hockey before training camp begins. And then after that, it's going to be right into the regular season. And hockey will be back in our lives, not just in the theoretical sense, talking about trades and cap situations, but actual games with players and dumb penalties and glorious goals and bad calls. I'm excited. If you can't tell, we've been waiting a long time for this, and it's so close, yet it still feels so far away for some reason.
This is going to be so great. I was talking with Jake about this before we started the stream, that just having no hockey has been such a downer and lack of motivation for us. And so I think we're just really excited to get a little bit of that kick as far as the emotions go and want to crank out a bunch more content, be excited to talk about some new things that are coming out. I know I'm so stoked for Team USA. It's interesting because I think it's, between Team USA and Team Canada this year. Canada is super stacked, but with, obviously as a Ducks fan, having so many Ducks prospects on Team USA. And the thing for me that I'm actually really excited about is to hopefully see Trevor Zegras actually get utilized properly, because he was third, fourth line center, or no, he was on the wing last year, I think. And what's that?
No, yeah, he was on the wing, and this upcoming they've announced, or not announced, but it came out that all camp basically he was skating on a line with Turcotte and Kaliev on the wing.
I mean,
I love that. That line was so good last season. They played together for a while, and they were so good. But they got such limited minutes, and it wasn't until the elimination games that he finally started getting more. Him and Kaliev started getting more of the playing time that they deserved. So I'm hoping now that these guys have the potential to be the top line, and we can really see, I think, what they're capable of. Because Team USA, on the offense at least, is extremely deep this year. This is probably one of the deepest offensive groups that we've seen in Team USA in some time.
Well, if you were still on the fence about rooting for Team USA, Cole Caulfield, goals, elite goal scorer,
small goals.
Excited to watch his development. That's going to be fun as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anything else for either of you for the show?
Well, do we have any questions in the Twitch chat? Any more questions?
So people in the Twitch chat, throw in some questions if you want. So let me go through the quick little spiel. So if you're watching this on any other platform, if you're watching this on YouTube or listening to this on any of your recorded platforms, we do a live stream of the show each and every time at twitch.tv/crashthepond. We go live every Sunday at 8 p.m. You can mark your calendars for that. We've been pretty much clockwork with that, except for a couple weeks here and there throughout this very, 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 very long off season. So if you want to subscribe, you can actually support this channel. If you have Amazon Prime, you get one free Twitch Prime sub each and every time. You just have to link your accounts, hit that subscribe button. You do have to do it every 30 days to help support this channel. Helps a lot. Get you special emotes in the chat, special badges next to your name, and it's a good time. So if you want to join in, watch us live, interact with us live, get your questions answered on this show, tune in 8 p.m. Sunday, twitch.tv/crashthepond. So Campafu has a question for us. If Miller doesn't re-sign and Dostal becomes the starter in the AHL and just kills it, does he get the call to the big leagues? I'm going to add this season to that question.
Well, okay. I just want to preface that I think Miller is coming back, but I would say that it's unlikely because I think they want to see him develop in the AHL. It would have to take an injury.
Well, and here's this on that is that the big thing for Dostal is he's coming over from a different ice surface. Finland.
He might not be. He's probably not NHL ready. The AHL is going to be an adjustment for him, like you're saying.
But it's going to be an adjustment not only because of skill, different things like that, but size of ice is very different. You're going from the Finnish ice, which is in between Olympic size and NHL size ice. And so the angles are different. There's a lot of things that have changed. And so the downside, if you bring him up, is he's actually not going to play. He's going to sit on the bench for most games. And so there's really not a big benefit for him being called up into the NHL. It's much better for him to be thrown into the AHL.
I could see him getting maybe 1 or 2 games this season, just if there's an injury, which is possible because of this crazy schedule that we're going to get. But I wouldn't bet on him getting any kind of significant time at the NHL level this season.
Yeah.
I agree.
So there was a question earlier on in the show that I cannot get to now, but it was basically wanted to know our thoughts on the thoughts of extended rosters that are kind of going on. There's conversation that the roster size may expand to 28 guys. Who knows what that will do to cap space if teams can carry 28 and it still counts against the cap. If you're able to have guys over 23 over your 23rd man not count against the cap. But what do you think about that there could be expanded rosters for this upcoming year?
I don't have any thoughts on it.
I like that idea, just especially with the way that they're going to do this without any actual bubbles. I'm not missing that. They're not planning on individual regional bubbles. We're planning on traveling, right?
No bubbles.
Okay. So if there's no bubbles, then I feel like given every other sport that hasn't had the bubble, so MLB, NFL, I think it's almost guaranteed that you are going to have some players test positive for COVID or have to drop out and not be there. So I actually do like the idea of carrying an extended roster. I don't think they should count that against the cap because I do think that is unfair for certain teams. So that being said, I like that idea a lot. I would hope that they are given time to practice, that they're given some action, whether that's extra training, scrimmages, things like that. As long as they aren't just kind of traveling with the team and sitting on a plane and going from hotel to hotel, I'm totally fine. And I would actually encourage an extended roster just to make sure that everybody is able to roster full teams.
Well, let me throw this out there because this is one thing I would ask about the cap hit situation is, how do you justify which players count against the cap and which guys don't? Because think about this. If a guy's on injured reserve, he counts against the cap. You don't get any cap relief for him being on injured reserve if it's short term. And so how do you necessarily pick and choose? Do you have an exception that then you can throw a guy that's injured on it? Or where's the line? What's the difference between COVID and injury? And so there's a lot of discussion that they're going to have with how they're going to do it. And I don't necessarily know if you can make those guys not count against the cap. I mean, maybe you have it be a specific taxi squad and they don't count against the cap, but it's going to be tough to really justify how you're going to do it if it's going to be an expanded roster straight up and not have it count against the cap, because the way the cap is currently set up with injured reserve. So there's a lot of questions with that, and that's definitely what they're discussing right now, and that's, I think, why we haven't seen an announcement, because it's been all but been reported by a lot of different people that they've agreed to how the financials are going to work. They don't love how they're going to work, but they've moved past that part of the discussion to now how are they actually going to make the season work. And so that is what they're figuring out now, and these are the conversations they're all having.
You hear that, MLB? That's how you actually do negotiations.
Well,
this NHL one was not great. Let's be real.
This just
it was a hell of a lot better than MLB was.
Yeah, this just shows how poorly Major League Baseball does everything, really. Did we ever find out about the fallout from the is it Justin Turner? Is that his name?
There was no fallout for it.
Yeah.
Well, that we know of, in terms of any positive COVID.
No, they announced that there'd be no supplemental discipline.
Okay, but we never found out if anyone got sick from that or anything.
No, there was a staff member, I think, who tested positive, but they think that they had tested positive separately and not necessarily from Turner. All the players and everybody on the field for the post-game celebration tested negative.
Wow, I feel safe for some reason now.
Pandemic solved. We're good. We can go about our lives.
Pandemic solved.
All right.
Can run around.
So,
but yeah, did we have another question?
Yeah, getting back to goalies, Fat Geralt asks us, is Stolarz good/decent enough to be a backup for this season?
So Anthony Stolarz has had good spot duty in the past. It's just we just don't know if he's capable of handling that larger workload, because he's never done it. He has some of the ability, just in terms of as a goalie in a vacuum, but it's a completely different game when you have to do it more frequently, and it's a different approach. It's a different preparation. And so that is, again, what leads me to believe, especially if the schedule is as compressed as it could be, it just doesn't make sense for the Ducks to have him as their backup. And that's not to take anything away from what he could potentially do. I just think of it from a team building perspective. If you intend to make the playoffs and you know that you're going to have a tight schedule, why would it make sense to have a completely unproven, or at least relatively unproven backup who you're going to need to come through for you? So that's just what leads me to think that the Ducks are going to bring back Miller somehow, because they need someone more proven at that position.
And here's the other thing that, the game is changing when it comes to playing your goaltenders, where goalies used to be regularly play, 70-plus games a year. Nowadays, the trend now is for kind of the max amount of games you want a goalie to play to be between the 60 and 65 range. Any more than that, and you start really getting concerned with injury. And obviously we've seen that with Gibson in the past. Now, of course, this is going to be a shorter season, so that won't hold as much water. But I think that some of that thinking would still stand, that I'm not necessarily sure if the Ducks are, and I know I wouldn't necessarily be comfortable with Stolarz taking up, like having 20 to 30% of the starts of a regular season to spell John Gibson. Ryan Miller, even in his age, I would have much more trust to do that. So I would agree with Felix that I think at this point it's just a matter of time before they sign Miller, because while Stolarz would be great in spot duty, I don't necessarily have enough trust in him to be able to handle a full-time backup role at this point.
Yeah, well, the thing is, if the Ducks were just kind of in a rebuilding gap year type season, then just have Stolarz as a backup, see what you have in him, and give him that opportunity. But if you're trying to actively make the playoffs, then you want a bit more of a proven commodity in that spot. And Jake, do the Ducks have to go into their LTIR to sign Miller?
Yes, they're 100% going to have to go into LTIR.
That's what you love to hear.
They're currently over the cap, although everything you read from Eric Stevens when he mentions it, he puts this out there that internally the Ducks are saying they are not over the cap. They actually have a little bit to work with. But that amount to work with is not going to get you a Ryan Miller.
Our math is more correct than your math.
So yeah, and so
Ryan Miller is going to cost you probably $1 million, I'm guessing, for the season.
Well, let me see. Yeah. The current roster is set up, and the Ducks have 14 forwards, 7 defensemen, and 1 goalie signed, and so that amount currently of 82.4 is without any sort of backup goalie on the roster. So they're going to have someone put up there.
I just don't know how you can both say that you want to make the playoffs and have Anthony Stolarz as your backup. It just, those two things don't go together.
And let me see here. Is there any sort of wiggle room that they have? No, I mean, it's actually going to get worse once Andrew Agozzino is no longer listed on the Ducks roster because he's currently there. He's making $700K. If he's sent down, and let's just say, for instance, Trevor Zegras comes up, that gains $200K against the cap for the Ducks. Because Trevor Zegras will make $925 or against the cap as compared to $700,000 for Agozzino. So there's not exactly a penny pinching way. I mean, the only way you can maybe do it is by send guys down. Maybe what the Ducks are considering is maybe they'll, instead of going 14 forwards, they go 13 forwards, and that's where their internal math is coming from with all of this. So yeah, it's they're also
a great alternative.
Yeah, it's not It's not a great alternative if in order to make yourself cap compliant is to not have a full roster, especially when we're just having the conversation about expanded rosters. So, weird situation for this Ducks team. They're going to have to go into LTIR. I don't know. I mean, granted, there is the conversation out there that Ryan Kessler, majority of his contract is covered by insurance, so they're not actually paying all of that 6.875, and they're actually not paying a lot of it.
Wouldn't that just be that wouldn't affect his cap hit though, would it?
No, but if we're talking about, they can put in an LTIR and they can get cap relief from it, so it's not the end of the world for them. It's not. We've talked about it. It's not great. The main issue is that if they were spending this much, would they want to spend that much on a team that's not great? I think real money, the 6.875 is not actually 6.875, and I think that's an important thing to make note of.
Yeah, it is important, but I just still have a hard time getting fully on board with we want to win now when we have our own math just to barely justify that we're cap compliant while also having a roster that's not really totally optimal.
That has to be why Ryan Miller's not signed.
Oh yeah, well that's what Eric Stevens has been postulating now for a couple weeks, or probably more than that, and I think it makes sense because how else would you do it, I guess, is the question.
Yeah.
So he's coming back. I don't know. Maybe I'm reading too much into his Instagram, which is just goalie gear and training. You know, he doesn't strike me as a retired guy from all of that.
Fair enough. All right. So I think that's probably going to do it for the night. So we actually got a new Apple Podcast review. So one way that you can support this show is through Apple Podcasts. Felix will get into the other ways afterwards. But if you want to go ahead and leave us a 5-star review there, it really helps out this show significantly. It's something that's completely free to you. All it takes is your time. And if you want to hit that 5 stars, it helps us out significantly with the Apple algorithm, get us up a little bit higher on their algorithm. So if you want to go ahead and do that and leave a review, we will read it on the show. So we got this one back on December 2nd from HanFet22, said, new Ducks fan, 5-star. As a new Ducks fan, Han. Oh, yep. Now I see it. Hanfet, like, yeah, Hansel. Yeah, that was bad. I'll admit that.
Come on now.
New Ducks fan, 5 stars. As a new fan to the Ducks, I'm enjoying the in-depth information and banter between these two. Really looking forward to my first season with the Ducks and Felix/Jake. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm also looking forward to being able to talk about Ducks games again. If I might say that, it's been a long time. So I'm hoping, I'm looking forward to you enjoying it. I'm looking forward to myself enjoying it also.
Yeah, it's going to be nice to have something new to talk about. So yes, also looking forward to seeing the reverse retro jerseys on the ice. Anyway, so thank you so much for that, HanFet22. And once again, just as a reminder, go to the Apple Podcast app, search Crash the Pond, and you can either just leave us the 5-star rating or go one step further and leave that review. It goes a very long way. If you're not on Apple Podcasts, We're pretty much everywhere where you can get your podcasts, I think. Spotify, we're on YouTube. I'll get into that in a second here. But another way that you can really support the show that does go a long way, we are on Patreon. So patreon.com/crashthepond. We have 2 tiers. So for $1 a month, you get access to our patrons only Discord chat, which is a lot of fun. In that chat, once the season does begin, what we did in the past and what we're going to do again is we're going to have in-game live chat. So we're just going to be going back and forth, talking about the game, reacting. We also get in there when there's big breaking news. So for example, when there was free agency in the draft, we were in there. The free agency in particular got really wild because of what the Ducks did. I wish we could have a recording of that chat when Derek Grant got signed again. That reaction was an all-timer. So that's for $1 a month.
I'm very happy we didn't do a live stream of free agency day.
Oh, it would have been so much fun. It would have been glorious just to see your reaction.
You and I have very different definitions of the word fun.
I would have just been laughing hysterically while Jake would just start drinking his sorrows away.
I would have gone for the bottle.
Oh, that's so good. Oh, there's still time. You can still do that now. But you don't worry. You'll have plenty of opportunities when Derek Grant is playing meaningful minutes under Dallas Aikens. So that's for $1 a month. Really, what it comes down to is for $1 a month, you get to hang out with other diehard Ducks fans and join our little community, which, as we said, is a lot of fun. Now, for $5 a month, you get access both to that chat and you also get access to 2 bonus episodes a month. So on these episodes, through the chat, you can actually submit topic suggestions, and we go in depth into different topics. Sometimes league-wide, we'll do league-wide rankings, so positional rankings, team rankings, coach rankings. We'll do more in-depth Ducks topics. So we did, didn't we do a bracket for former Ducks coaches? Who's the best Ducks coach of all time? So we kind of go more in depth. We also just go more off the board there. We're not as tied to the news of the day or news of the week as we are on the regular show. And it's there's a lot more banter on there. So if you enjoy the kind of fun, lighter side of this show, well, on those bonus episodes, we may talk about Star Wars. We may talk about food rankings.
So
yeah, there's going to be a lot to talk about with The Mandalorian.
I'm putting this out there. It's going to be a 3-man one on our next one. We're going to be recording it after the Mandalorian season finale.
I thought there was... Oh, was 15 not the finale?
No, it was not. That is why this has been delayed, Felix, till next week.
I, for some reason, thought that was the last one, which I'm glad it wasn't because 15... Thumbs middle?
What?
Just kidding.
What is wrong with you? What is wrong with you?
Just wanted to see your reaction to that.
Not going to get into any spoilers right now, but it will be a full spoiler Patreon episode going through the entire season of The Mandalorian.
Make sure you've watched all of it beforehand.
This will be the final Patreon episode before hockey gets back, so we're going to get real weird with it.
Oh, that's right. Oh, man. Okay.
Let's do it.
Okay, so that's for $5 a month, and that's at patreon.com/crashthepond. Now, if you are someone who likes to listen/watch to podcasts or watch podcasts on YouTube, well, we are on YouTube as well, youtube.com/crashthepond. Videos go up on Sunday nights, late Sunday night, and make sure that you subscribe to us there. Make sure that you turn on your notifications so that you know that you get notified immediately as soon as the show goes up. The great thing about the YouTube channel, besides getting to see our made-for-radio faces, is that you also get to interact with Jake in the comments. So if you leave a comment, Jake will get a notification on his phone.
I see you.
And he will reply immediately. We've gotten some pretty good banter in there. I should probably jump in at some point. The only issue is my YouTube account was created in like 2006 and is a really embarrassing name.
You can change your name, right?
I really don't want to though. There's a posterity element that I kind of want. I'm kind of latching.
He wants to remain perpetually embarrassed.
You know, you could create a new account, right?
I want to say it, but then people are gonna look it up. At least one person will look it up, and they will see my embarrassing YouTube videos that I uploaded when I was like.
Okay. Now you have to spill it. You can't give us that tease now.
You're selling this channel so hard right now, Felix.
I used to do street hockey videos, thinking that they were just the best thing ever, but they were just iMovie like the Macintosh in 2006, 2005.
So what is the name of your
Everybody's
account? What is the name
cyberbullied
of your
Felix
account?
into revealing his screen name.
Okay, I guess I'll just
You can't give us that tease and then not put it out there.
Well, if you've made it this far into the show, I'm assuming that you're more of a diehard and you're gonna approach us from a good faith perspective. So Habs all the way. Habs all the way 92 is the account name. So there you go. I put it out there. Search it at your own risk.
That's not nearly as embarrassing as I thought it was going to be.
It's just exactly me at that age. I don't know.
It is.
It still is me now, kind of. But yeah,
Wait,
so YouTube.
Say it again. Say it again, please.
No, that I said it once.
CJ, what was it?
I think it was Habs fan 92 or Habs are great 92, something like that.
Oh, you're gonna have to. If you didn't catch it the first time, I can't help you beyond that.
Habs fan 93.
Nope.
Oh, Ken Papa
wouldn't
just
even
dropped
be
it in the
93.
chat. Tony just dropped it in the chat.
That's Tree Talk. Oh, Habs all the way 92. Oh, let's see.
There it is.
My vlog. Let's see if I can play one of these. Just the audio.
Oh, come on.
Do I play? Do I play one of these? Just the audio. The Nikki B.
Please don't.
Oh, yeah.
My goalie skills goal montage. Oh, this is amazing.
Hey, I said it was
the audio from it's playing right now. Our OBS is not set up right now to have a screen shown with 3 people. But
I can't believe I gave this away.
Wow, there are a lot. There are way more videos on here than I expected.
Yeah, there's a lot.
Detroit City.
Okay. We need to end this. This is good.
All right. Let's end this. Felix has suffered.
Felix,
enough
I would
tonight.
like to let you know that the Crash the Pond account is officially subscribed and has notification bells turned on.
I have 36 subscribers. That's actually more than I thought I still had.
It's gonna go up significantly now. Everyone, go subscribe to Felix's channel.
Oh my god! Looking at this is just brutal. Okay, I need to take a couple of these down.
Some highlights from NHL 06.
One of them is me. I recorded a friend in college freshman year getting a haircut, and it still gets comments to this day. Someone's like, "Oh, he looks so much better now with that haircut." Go figure. YouTube algorithm.
That's kind of wholesome.
There's a couple on there that are not wholesome that I need to remove quickly. But anyway, I'll get to that. All right, everybody. How else can you support the show? Oh yeah, check us out on social media. So CJ is on there at CJ Woodling. Jake is on there at Reindeer Games 91. I'm on there at Felix_Sicard. CrashThePond.com, at Crash the Pond on Twitter. Search Crash the Pond on Facebook. Yes, we are finally on Facebook. And with all of that being said, with all of these...
Fatcher Alt said, by the way, that you had 30 subs 5 minutes ago. So...
Oh, no. It just went to 37. All right, we need to get out of here. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. Have a great week, and we will talk to you at the next show.
Bye.